Federico Faggin, the brilliant physicist who invented the first commercial microprocessor, now says something most scientists are too afraid to whisper. Reality is not physical. After decades inside the heart of Silicon Valley, helping build the very fabric of modern computing, he turned his gaze inward. What he found shook him. He now claims that consciousness, not matter, is the foundation of everything. The physical world, just a symbolic interface created by mind to interact with something much deeper. That's not spiritual fluff. That's coming from a man who helped build the digital age. And yet, the moment he looked at perception, at the senses we blindly trust, he saw a terrifying truth. What you see, what you touch, what you hear isn't reality. It's a hallucination created by your brain. Think about that. If the senses lie, what are you actually experiencing? In this video, we're going deeper than science dares to go. Beyond matter, beyond thought, beyond the ego's illusion of control. Because if everything you believe starts with your senses, what happens when you realize they've been tricking you from the start? 1. The hallucination of the senses. Most people walk through life convinced they're touching, seeing, and hearing the real world. But the truth? They're not. Everything we think of as physical is actually translated, turned into electrical signals that the brain interprets. So when you feel the texture of wood or hear your name being called, what you're really experiencing is your mind's best guess, not reality, just a filtered illusion created from limited input. That's why two people can see the same scene and walk away with completely different impressions. Take a hot cup of coffee, for example. What feels like warmth in your hands isn't heat in your skin. It's your nerves sending electric signals to your brain, which then decides, yes, warmth. That entire experience, which feels so physical, so concrete, is happening in your consciousness, not in the cup. This throws a wrench in how we define real. Because if perception is manufactured inside your head, then your reality is more like a hallucination than you think. Your senses don't show you the world. They show you a version your mind has accepted. And that version, it's based on old assumptions, cultural stories, childhood conditioning, past trauma. Your ego plays a role too. It wants safety, predictability, control. So it edits what you perceive to fit a narrative. That's why you ignore signs that contradict your beliefs or don't notice what makes you uncomfortable. Your brain deletes what doesn't match its model. Not because it's broken, because it's efficient, but in that efficiency, you lose access to the mystery, the unknown, the truth that's hiding in plain sight. So what are you really experiencing? Not the world out there. You're experiencing a projection of it. A dream so convincing it fools even the most skeptical. And once you catch even a glimpse of this, you can't unsee it. You start to notice the cracks in the illusion, the slight delay in sound, the strange déjà vu, the way reality bends when you pause and really look. And that's when a deeper question begins to surface, one that your mind can't easily answer. 2. Perception is a story, not a fact. Perception is not a mirror reflecting the world. It's a canvas your mind paints in real time. Every sound you hear, every face you recognize, every situation you react to is filtered through an invisible layer of personal history. You don't perceive the world as it is. You perceive it as you are. Your experiences, emotions, and beliefs shape the picture before it even reaches your awareness. That's why you can be in a room full of people and still only notice the ones who confirm what you already believe. It's not observation, it's narration. Imagine two people walking into the same meeting. One feels ignored, the other feels admired. Nothing changed in the room. It was the internal filters that created two separate versions of reality. That's what makes perception so powerful and so deceptive. It doesn't just interpret information, it builds meaning from it. If someone grew up hearing, "You're not enough," their brain will seek out proof of it in every glance, silence, and pause. That's not reality. That's the ego recycling its old familiar story over and over again. This story is sticky. It feels personal, but it's not. It's stitched together from schoolyard moments, family patterns, media influences, and whatever else you unknowingly absorbed. That internal voice that says, "This always happens to me." It's not a prediction. It's a memory disguised as foresight. Your brain wants stability, so it turns past pain into future expectation. You think you're seeing what's real, but you're actually reinforcing the illusion. The more certain you are of how things really are, the more trapped you are in perception, not truth. The most dangerous part, you rarely question it. You assume what you see is what's there. But try this. Spend a day asking yourself, what else could this mean? That small pause can reveal how often your mind fills in gaps with assumptions instead of facts. Notice how a tone of voice becomes a judgment or a delayed text becomes rejection. Ask, am I reacting to what happened or to the story I told myself about what happened? Because the story feels solid, but reality, true reality, is still waiting, just beyond the lens your mind refuses to clean. 3. Memory is fiction dressed as fact. Memory feels like a sacred vault, solid, untouched, unchangeable, but science tells a different story. Each time you remember something, you're not retrieving a file, you're recreating it, editing it, adding new colors based on current feelings. That vacation you swear was perfect might have been full of tension you forgot. That childhood story you've told 100 times. You might have borrowed parts of it from someone else's memory. Your mind doesn't store truth. It stores useful stories, shaped by your current state of consciousness. There's an experiment where people were convinced they got lost in a shopping mall as children, even though it never happened. They began to recall details, the tiles on the floor, the sound of their name being called, even the panic they felt. None of it was real, but it felt real. That's how powerful memory is. It doesn't just reflect your past, it shapes your present. If your brain can fabricate entire scenes with such clarity, how much of your identity is based on fiction? This is where ego clings the hardest. It wants to believe, this is who I am because of what I've lived. But what if what you've lived is only partially accurate? If your perception of the past changes depending on your mood, how reliable is it? You may define yourself by a betrayal, a loss, or a success. But those moments aren't carved in stone. They're shaped by memory's retelling. And if the retelling shifts, so does the identity built on top of it. Who you think you are might just be the most persistent illusion of all. Try this exercise. Write down a memory, something you're absolutely sure happened a certain way. Then ask someone who was there to describe it too. Notice the differences, not just in details, but in emotional tone. This reveals something deeper. If your memories are fluid, your identity is too. And when identity softens, the need to defend the self begins to dissolve. You become less attached to, I am this because that happened, and more open to the possibility that you're something far more flexible than the mind wants to admit. 4. The voice in your head is just a program. You know that voice, the one that narrates your every move, critiques your actions, replays conversations, and predicts disaster. Most people spend their whole lives listening to it without realizing one simple truth. That voice isn't them. It's not a soul speaking. It's a script, a program built from years of repetition, societal rules, childhood conditioning, and unresolved emotion. It sounds like you because it lives in your head, but it wasn't written by you. It was installed, like software, by the world around you. Think about it. That judgment that popped up when you saw your reflection in the mirror, where did it come from? You weren't born with it. Somewhere along the line, someone taught you that your worth was tied to appearance. Same with the fear of failure, the doubt, the guilt. These voices speak with authority, but they're echoes of old voices, parents, teachers, culture. The ego clings to them because it thrives on certainty. It needs a narrative, even if that narrative is filled with pain and limitation. The real kicker, you can hear it, you can observe it. That means you are not it. The moment you start watching the voice instead of identifying with it, something shifts. Try sitting quietly for 10 minutes and just listening to your mind without responding. Notice how random, chaotic, and automatic it is. One moment it tells you you're doing great. The next it says you're failing. It's not consistent because it's not you. It's a mechanism, an illusion wrapped in language, dressed as wisdom. So what happens when you stop believing the voice? You don't become empty. You become aware. Consciousness steps forward, and suddenly there's space between thought and reality. In that space, peace begins. You realize that freedom was never about controlling the mind. It was about seeing it clearly. And once you start watching instead of reacting, the voice loses its grip. But what about the decisions it claims to make? What if even those aren't coming from where you think they are? 5. Free will is a delayed reaction. We like to believe we're in control, that we make our own choices, that when we say, "I decided," it came from a clear, conscious place. But studies show otherwise. Neuroscience has revealed that your brain initiates a decision before you're aware of having made it. The signal to act appears milliseconds before the thought does, meaning the conscious mind, the part that says, "I chose," is late to the party. It's more of a commentator than a creator. You're not deciding, you're noticing the decision. Let's say you reach for a snack, you think, "I want chips." But what caused that? Was it really hunger or a memory of comfort? A commercial you saw earlier? A habit? That impulse emerged from a chain of unconscious processes that your awareness only caught at the end. Your ego, of course, takes credit. I decided, but consciousness didn't lead the way. It followed. That doesn't make you a robot. It just means the script is being written deeper than you think. This idea can feel uncomfortable at first, like you're just floating through life on autopilot. But there's a hidden freedom in seeing it clearly, because if your thoughts and impulses aren't fully yours, you don't have to take them so seriously. You can pause, observe. Let the reaction pass without grabbing it. Try this. The next time you feel triggered or impulsive, wait 3 seconds. Just 3. That gap is where awareness lives. In that space, you can see the illusion without being dragged by it. So if you're not choosing your thoughts, who's driving this thing? That's the real question. And once you start watching closely, you'll notice that life moves without needing you to force it. Like the breath that flows, the heart that beats, or the dream that dreams itself. Something is moving through you. Something deeper than ego. Deeper than thought. And once you glimpse it, you start to question everything. Even the idea that the world outside is as solid as it appears. 6. Matter doesn't exist the way you think. You were taught that the world is made of solid objects, fixed in space and time, tables, trees, your own body. It all feels physical, dependable. But quantum physics throws that assumption out the window. At the smallest level, particles don't behave like things. They behave like possibilities, waves of potential that only take form when observed. In other words, matter isn't there until you look. Your attention collapses the wave into what seems like a stable object. But it's not stability, it's participation. Think about how weird that is. If you're not looking, the particle doesn't pick a place. It's not hiding, it's undefined. Like a dream that solidifies only when you step inside it. So what does that say about the chair you're sitting on? Or the screen you're reading this from? Maybe they exist as concepts more than concrete objects. Maybe they are ideas, interpreted by consciousness, not confirmed by it. The illusion is that they're solid. The truth is, they're probabilities, waiting for your perception to give them shape. Try this experiment. Sit quietly and stare at your hand. Not as your hand, but just as shape, movement, sensation. Feel how it becomes unfamiliar, almost dreamlike. This isn't magic, it's your brain recalibrating perception. You're peeling away the assumption that it's a thing and experiencing it as shifting energy, because that's all it ever was. Matter, in the strictest sense, doesn't exist as we imagine it. It exists as a construct, an ongoing interpretation by a mind trained to see form where there may be none. So if matter isn't fixed, and the physical world depends on observation, what happens when no one's watching? What is a tree in the forest without a mind to see it? These questions aren't meant to be answered. They're meant to stretch you, to loosen the grip of certainty. Because the more you explore, the more reality begins to feel less like a place and more like an interface. And just beyond that interface, another illusion waits to be questioned. One not in the world outside, but in the identity within. 7. Awakening is not finding truth. It's seeing the illusion. Most people imagine awakening as some grand revelation, a moment where all the answers appear, the secrets of the universe are revealed, and everything finally makes sense. But real awakening isn't about adding more, it's about subtracting. It's the moment you realize that most of what you've believed about yourself, the world, and what's real was never true to begin with. The illusion doesn't collapse with a bang. It unravels slowly, with every false certainty you let go of. Truth isn't found. Illusion is seen through. There's no fireworks, no guru handing you a golden key. Instead, there's silence. There's stillness. There's the uncomfortable realization that the self you've spent your whole life protecting isn't as real as you thought. The ego panics. It wants to fix, improve, or escape. But the deeper part of you, the quiet consciousness underneath, just watches. And in that watching, something shifts. Not a dramatic transformation, but a soft falling away. Like waking up from a dream you didn't know you were in. People often ask, so what do I do once I wake up? But that's the ego talking again. Always doing. Always chasing. Awakening doesn't give you control. It takes away the illusion that you ever had it. And in that space, life begins to move differently. Not better, not worse, just cleaner. You stop grabbing onto thoughts like they're lifelines. You stop identifying with emotion like it's your identity. You become like water, aware, present, flowing, not needing to define what you are, just being. But here's the twist. Once you've seen the illusion, it doesn't vanish. It keeps showing up, the thoughts, the patterns, the old stories. But now you know. Now you see them for what they are. You stop mistaking the dream for the dreamer. And in that awareness, you start to feel something deeper moving through it all. Not an idea, not a belief, just presence. And the more you rest there, the more you begin to wonder, what else have I believed that was never real to begin with?